So it's a genuine honor to welcome to the New Hampshire Journal podcast, Andy Volinsky. You know him as a former candidate for governor, as a former executive councilor. I know him as the author of The Last Bake Sale, The Fight for Fair School Funding, which I have a copy of, but it's on my phone. Andy, what does the book look like?
The book is here. How about that? I just happen to have a couple hundred copies here.
Well, having written a few books myself, I know exactly what you mean. By the way, I love the fact it's pie on the cover because I love pie. Everybody loves pie. That's very, very smart. But I wanted you to come on and not talk. Everyone wants to talk about partisan politics and who's up and who's down, all that stuff. And except I have a warning, geek alert. If you are not into the details of education funding and tax policy, we may lose you here because that's what I want to talk about. So let me start just with to me, the most basic question. In an ideal world, who should be responsible for paying for my child's education? And I'll go first to make it easy for you. In an ideal world, it would be me. In an ideal world, educating my kid would be just like clothing my kid and feeding my kid and, taking my kid on vacation. It would be my job as a parent. That's the ideal world way to pay for education. Andy Volinsky, what's yours?
So you won't like me answering your question with a question.
That's not fair.
But so let me pose a question. I'll give you the answer and then I'll answer your question. Who does education benefit? So
education benefits everybody, but all kinds of things benefit everybody. Running a good restaurant benefits everybody because it creates jobs and it gives people a place to eat. There's nothing that humans do that's positive that doesn't benefit people beyond their immediate scope. So that's not an answer.
No, well, you jumped in too soon, but let's stick with your restaurant. So you don't need to go to a restaurant to fully participate in our democracy.
That's true.
You could skip the restaurant and make your own damn meal. But if you can't read and write, critically think, articulate your positions, you're going to get left out of the democracy. And quite frankly, that was the thinking of the guy who drafted our education clause. That was John Adams. And he drafted it for Massachusetts, and then we copied it when we broke away from the Massachusetts Bay Colonies. So if your sole view of education is it benefits me, or in your example, benefits my child,
my kids,
then you should pay for it. But if your view is that it's integral to a functioning democracy, then those who want a functioning democracy should share the cost. And I would go another step. Those who believe in the common good should be willing to contribute to it. Those who are less enlightened and are more interested in their own benefits should understand that. I'll give you an example. There is a recognized correlation between children who do not read at grade level by third grade and people who go to jail. So it's a little like the Midas muffler guy, pay me now or pay me later. So by investing in the common good, having a well-functioning education system that doesn't depend on parents' wealth. I'm a scholarship kid. So if I had to depend on my parents' wealth, I would not have gone to college, or I wouldn't have been able to complete it in a reasonable time. I certainly, if I had a lot of college debt, I couldn't have gone to law school. I had a ton of debt from law school, as did my wife. But we both had college scholarships.
But you're now traveling down the road of the real. My question was ideal. That's why I framed it the way I did. What is, in the ideal world, how would you do it? And the way, so I gave you mine. So in the ideal world, who would pay for my kid's education in the ideal world of Andy Volinsky?
John Adams had it right. I think we all contribute.
So everybody would pay. So if all collectively paying, then who ideally would be the collective who pays my kids? Would it be me and my neighbors at the local level? Would it be me and my fellow Granite Staters, or would it be me and my fellow Americans in the idea? Once again, we're talking, theory and
Yeah, yeah.
philosophy here in the ideal world of Andy Volinsky.
Yeah. So I think there was a time when property ownership was a fair estimate of your wealth. Back then, property ownership was more than real estate. It was the grist mill, it was the tools of the cobbler, it was the inventory of the town merchandiser.
Right.
Wealth is different now. So I don't understand why we stick to an older method of measuring wealth. I assume if you were to come over to my side of the aisle and agreed that it was a common responsibility,
Mhm.
that you'd want the people who were contributing to contribute fairly. We can talk about what fairly
Okay.
means,
Mm.
but if we're using a measure of fairness that no longer applies,
Right.
it's appropriate to say, why are we stuck with that measure?
Sure.
There was a time in certain parts of America where wealth was measured in how many enslaved people you had.
Right.
Not appropriate measure of wealth now.
Mhm.
And realty, which is a bastardized form of property ownership because it's
Mhm.
so limited, I don't think captures crypto
Mhm.
or, the people who made all
Right.
the money on the insider trading
Mhm.
related to the Iran attacks.
Right.
Their money's not in real estate, it's in more fungible income.
Well, setting aside the conspiracy theory that the Iran attacks were part of an insider trading deal, so you want to have people's payment for education based not on the fact that they're in the community where the education is happening, it's their neighbors, whatever. You want it based on wealth. You want a social justice model. Do I understand that right?
I think that's a fair
Mm,
rough
mm.
gauge for it, but I feel like you're trying to push me somewhere. So
Oh no,
where do
I'm
you
just
want to
trying to
go with
understand.
that?
We are literally I'm way up the ladder of abstraction. Before we get into what about this number, what about that number, I just kind of want to see where you're coming from. I mean, once again, I think it would be great if everybody was wealthy enough and the price point was right that they could go out and shop for the ideal education for their kid. They could put their kid exactly in the right school for them, because they have that ability, and we wouldn't be involved. In other words, my neighbor would do whatever, church school, another neighbor would do athletic programs, another neighbor would homeschool, and that's my world. And there would be as little community involvement as possible because I want individuals to have the opportunity to pick the best school for them. If you're so I'm trying to get that's where I am, and I'm just
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
understand where you are. So, for example, if I understand this, the 3-3 plan right, which right now, give the website. We're going to give it multiple times. Where can I find the 3-3 tax savings plan on the web?
At the NH tax savings calculator.com.
You wanted to make it easy. Okay, good. You wanted it to roll off the tongue. I like that.
I didn't choose it.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So, your plan, there are people now who are paying property taxes either as renters or as homeowners who are contributing. But if their income is at a certain level and I think it's a $250,000 deduction for the
Homestead
homestead,
exemption,
right?
yes. And
So
similar,
you'd have a bunch of people paying nothing for education. They'd be zero skin in the game, no property
um,
tax, no income tax.
well, not quite. Um, the plan funds about 80% of the cost
Ah,
of
okay,
public ed. So we designed it as best we could to keep some skin in the game locally. So it's not all state funding.
right,
Vermont, for example, has all state funding,
right.
and they're finding some problems with that and morphing a little bit back towards adding an element of local funding. So under the plan, there are probably 8 or 9 communities that don't have to raise school money locally, but
Mm,
the vast majority are raising something
mm,
locally. And again, there's the difference between school property taxes and
Right.
municipal property taxes. We're
So
only
what?
talking about school.
So since we've stumbled into numbers, I was hoping not to get there quite so fast, but let's go ahead. Walk
Okay.
through the 3-3 plan for everyone, please.
Well, aptly named 3-3 stands for a 3% income tax for education with high deductibles, $35,000 per taxpayer, 15,000 for dependents, an extra 15,000 for single people who are head of a household. That's the first three. It's married to a $3 true state property tax. And I can explain what true
Yep.
means.
True. Yeah,
Um,
go ahead since you brought it up.
but let me finish the
Sure.
explanation. So $3 true state property tax with a $250,000 homestead exemption for primary residents
Mhm.
in New Hampshire and a similar renter's homestead exemption because as you know, renters pay landlords
Right,
indirectly
exactly.
property taxes. So by true state property tax, I mean it's levied by the state, it's
Mhm.
paid to the state, and the state, through the Education Trust
Right,
Fund, disperses the money,
right,
as opposed to what we have, which allows 25 or 30 communities to pay a materially lower state property tax rate than everybody else. And it's because their property is so valuable, they can
right,
raise the required amount with less
right.
than it's about $1.10 in the
Mhm.
current state property tax.
They're paying it's just at a lower rate because they have more property value.
Yes.
That's everyone, they're paying the same rate. So and that you're saying that would cover about 80% of
Yes.
education funding? So
Yes.
why then shouldn't the state control 80% of the school's activities? 80% of the curriculum, 80% of the hiring. I mean, the people who pay, what is it? You dance, dance, you got to pay the fiddler or whatever. There's some fiddler thing in there that's I know. If you're
You're the
gonna
guy
if you're
from
gonna if
South
you're gonna
Carolina.
take exactly if you're gonna take the money and put it and make the state responsible for paying all the bills, shouldn't the state then decide how the schools get to run?
I think it's a different question, but the state already dictates a lot of what happens in New Hampshire public schools, number one.
Mm,
Number two, if you don't have enough money in your school district, the only choices you have are what's to cut. And
right,
Claremont's the example. Claremont cut all kinds of activities when they found they were grossly short of funds in July or August this year. So if if we had an ideal system where the locals, excuse me, paid most of the money and the
right.
locals had most of the control,
Mm,
your argument makes sense, but that's not the reality of it. And moreover, it's a separate question. I understand they would trend towards each other.
right,
Money means power in this
right.
circumstance, but doesn't have to be that way.
Oh, no, it doesn't have to be that way. But I guess what I'm saying is when you tell, for example, the people who have the highest income in the state would be paying a lot more of the education bill. And so it would make more, it would make sense that, well, I'm paying the bills. Why not have more say as opposed to saying to the local communities, hey, it's your school. And it's interesting. So, what do you mean when you say that the state makes most of the decisions? I'm not a super expert on public schools, but I've been following it here for New Hampshire for a few years. There seems to be a lot of local hiring, firing, curriculum. I mean, obviously the state is trying to do stuff like, keep the crazy Ibram X. Kendi racism out of the classrooms and stuff like that. But they don't have a lot of beyond that. What it seems like the
Well,
schools pick the curriculum, they pick the teachers, they pick the emphasis. Am I wrong?
I think you're oversimplifying it.
Okay.
So there
That's
are,
my specialty, by the way. So oversimplifying is my wheelhouse.
all right, fair enough. Um, so maybe one thing to understand to make it easier is
Mhm.
school districts are run by superintendents, right? The way to think about a superintendent is the superintendent works for the local school district
Right.
and also reports directly to the Commissioner of Education. So the person in charge of everything that happens in a school district has a
Mhm.
dual report. And with
Right.
that dual report, The current commissioner doesn't do it, but Frank Edelblue certainly did not hesitate to call superintendents who said things or did things he didn't like on the carpet. And so I'm not trying to suggest Edelblue was wrong and the current commissioner is right,
Right.
but the authority to do it is clearly there. State also sets the certification standards.
Hmm.
The state sets the minimum standards that you have to meet to be an approved New Hampshire elementary, middle,
Right.
or high school. Those are big chunks of what a school can do.
And wouldn't that drift towards state power just continue if you shifted to a tax collected, an income tax collected at the state level and a property tax collected at the state level? Why shouldn't they say, whatever, school
Yeah.
masks or whatever the controversy is of the day? Hey, it's our money, do it our way.
Yeah, I think the state already does a lot of that, so
Mm.
I don't see
Okay.
a huge
Well, then
change.
let's move on to something else. I thought it was interesting from your
Okay.
book. You said that relying on local taxes for schools is a sign that New Hampshire leaders, quote, lack commitment to the common good. Now, my understanding about property taxes, the reason they've been around so long is that they're reliable, that, you have a bad year, a good year, sales and income go up and down. Property tax generally steady. Is it really a lack of morality or, commitment to the common good, or maybe it's just practical mathematics?
Um, I think if we go back to the idea that the value of property is no longer an indicator of
Right.
your worth, your financial worth, you start there. There has been a need to review the New Hampshire by
Mm.
a ton is the most reliant on local property taxes to fund schools of
Right.
any state in America. All right.
Mm.
New Hampshire is an exceptional place, but we are not accepted from the laws of economics. So you have property taxes, you don't pay it by giving up a
Right.
corner of your backyard, you pay it with your income.
Mm.
And if your income has fallen that year, or
Right.
God forbid you got sick, or a loved
Mm.
one divorced you, whatever,
Right.
you still have that ever
Mm.
increasing property
Right.
tax bill. And you don't have the income. And we, unlike some other states, don't deal with that.
Mm.
And if you're okay, I'll give you one example.
So please,
Um,
please do.
this is a particularly acute problem for seniors
Mm.
whose income has declined over years or flattened while their property taxes keep going up and they get forced out of their homes. Our neighbor, the state of Maine, has a loan program. So the state of Maine will lend your municipality the equivalent of your back property taxes, and they'll
Mm.
take a lien on your home and they'll collect it when you die or
Sure.
sell the house. It's a
Mm.
$5 million program. Why doesn't New Hampshire have that if we're really committed
Right.
to doing a viable property
Right.
tax program? That's
But
a big oversight.
some
But
people who oppose an income tax approach, don't say it has nothing to do with common good. The notion of morality and taxation is a separate issue. It's trust. They don't. It's not that they are, don't care about their neighbors. It's that they don't trust the people in Concord to hand them two taxes in order to lower one tax because they're pretty confident that when they look up in 5 or 10 years that they're going to have two high taxes instead of one high tax. Isn't that just as legitimate reason to be concerned? And how do you, assuage or assuage, I can never remember, those concerns?
I, so I've heard that concern
Mm.
articulated. I'd say two things. First, how's the current system working for you?
Mm.
We have over reliance on the property tax such that people either can't get into the housing market
Right.
because their taxes are six, eight, $10,000,
Mm.
or they're getting forced out of their homes. If
Mm.
we had dealt with those issues in other ways, maybe we wouldn't have this conversation. But with the main example is one, we don't deal with that. So that's number one. Number two, I think we need to look up. And by that, I mean look up at people with higher incomes. Are they
Mm,
contributing a similar share of their income
right.
through property or income taxes
Mm,
as
right.
you are? So there's a group called the Institute for Tax and Economic Policy. They put out an annual report called Who Pays? And in New Hampshire, the working class family, the middle class family,
Mm,
pay a lot more of their income than the wealthiest 20%, 5% in the
mm,
state. It's a chart that looks like this
mm,
with the highest burden on the
right.
poorest people in the state. All this plan does is it makes it level. Everyone
Mm,
pays. There's an argument that it should be more progressive and the wealthy
right.
people should pay more. This doesn't do that. It
Right.
just says instead of having the
Mm,
poorest 20% pay three
right.
times what the wealthiest have them pay the same. Hard
So
to argue with that.
so here's the deal. So if let's say that the 3-3 plan passed tomorrow, I would want to have a Julian Simon style bet with you, the one that he had with the population bomb guy who just died. I forget. And my bet would be 10 years from now, the income tax rate will be higher and the property tax rate will be higher. Would you take that bet?
If you limited it to the school tax, because I'm not talking about
I
police and
understand.
fire.
Understand.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Are
I
we
would,
putting, we putting,
I would plan on collecting your money because as the state has contributed more to schools, school taxes have gone up. As the state has given more to local municipalities, municipality taxes have gone up. And so, why should people who are concerned about taxes, who love the fact that we have the highest return on investment in the country, that we make every dollar work, say, let's give these, let's put, let's add a new way to collect more money to the people who already know that once it gets to the local level, the only question that a local school board asks is, where's the rest of my money? There's no cutting, there's no savings, there's no connection between enrollment and spending. So why would you create a new path for more money to these people who just roll around in money?
so the current circumstance has the great bulk of school funding coming from local property taxes. I think
Right.
we agree on that. In
Mm,
the past couple of legislative sessions, the Free State leadership in the legislature has tried harder and harder to cap local budgets for schools.
right.
And those efforts have been rejected at town
Mm,
meetings and
right.
SB2 meetings, not
Mm,
because school administrators are demanding more money, but because people
right.
value their local schools. So first, I think there's a disconnect to say we're just going to be profligate spenders. We
Mm,
have needs. Energy costs go up, healthcare costs, God,
mm,
go through the roof. We have
mm,
to deal with that in a school as you would in a business. But let me
right.
tell you, I hope not too many people watch this because I'm going to tell you about a quiz I give.
Uh-oh.
So
Uh,
when I speak, I ask
right.
people, you have local taxes and you have state taxes,
Mm,
you have federal taxes. Put
right.
aside the federal because they're the same across the country.
Right.
Look at the burden of local and state taxes.
Right.
Who has the highest burden? Maine, New Hampshire, or Vermont, the three New England states. Everyone
For,
says local and state combined.
oh, local and state combined. I don't who has the highest?
Yeah, of those
I
three.
would I would guess Vermont.
Okay. You're better informed than
Oh, okay.
three quarters. So Maine and Vermont are top five in their
Mm,
burden. New
right.
Hampshire is 25th.
Mm,
We don't have a particularly high tax burden.
right.
It's all, though, centered on the property tax.
Right.
And so if we
Mm,
could spread that burden to other revenue
right.
sources, I was thinking what I would say to you is if this is a business, you would
Right.
not want to have a single revenue source. on
Sure.
which your business relied. If you were a
Right.
card company, you would not
Right.
want all your revenue to come from Christmas cards. You'd want to maybe do an Easter and a Mother's Day and a birthday card so that revenue comes in all
Right.
year and from different sources. So depending on what happens in the economy, property values go
Mhm.
up, income comes
Sure.
down, the other way around. It's balanced.
Right. And see, I think that's maybe where you and I are, that's the gulf between us, is that
Okay.
you see the revenue coming into the schools and the towns as the business and you want to diversify it. And I see the product that's being delivered, which is the education, as the business. And I want to control the expenditures and keep my number of bills I have to watch to a minimum because that's why New Hampshire is number one in return on investment and Massachusetts is down in the 30s or 40s because they've got so many pipelines of money coming in and it's easy for individual pipelines to go away. And that's why when I want to ask you this, here's my deal I'll offer you right now. I have my magic wand with me somewhere in here. I will get you your income tax. I'll get it. In fact, I will make it all income tax if you'll agree to me with me that no school can spend more than $25,000 per kid and permanently capped, adjusted for inflation. If you'll give me that deal, I'll give you your income tax. So how about it, Andy Volinsky?
So I think you may have just stepped in it.
Why?
Because the 3-3 tax savings plan, if you read the explanation we put on
Mhm.
nhtaxsavingscalculator.com, it's not designed to increase spending.
No, I
It,
understand that it's not going to. I agree, and thank you for saying that. One of the things that people are confused by is they think you're adding the income tax on top of what we have, and this is a pure.
yeah.
This is a social justice shift. It's not fair that property taxpayers take that much of a burden. You're going to shift it over. I'm saying to you, I'll give you your income tax deal if you will agree with me to a spending cap of $25,000 per kid, adjusted for inflation. No school can take more money than that from the taxpayers per kid.
Why, if you want locals to be in charge despite money coming
Mhm.
from the state, why would you tell them they can't raise local money in addition?
Because I
I
know that
understand
that's
what you're
exactly what they're
asking.
going to do. That's the whole. See, this is the whole point. If we give you your system, we're going to have your tax
Well,
and then all the other taxes because they're never going to stop spending. Spending
well,
has doubled since the year 2000 in nominal dollars. Actually, more than that. It's actually double. If you go back to 1999, it's 180% increase. Excuse me, 106% increase, 80% adjusted for inflation. The number of students continues to plunge. The amount of spending continues to rise. You mentioned healthcare costs, et cetera. Every segment of the economy has that. That's why you use the inflation number. Schools did not suffer a magic spending problem or a cost problem. In fact, the things you do in schools are actually cheaper than ever. Thanks to computers and tech, you don't have to buy the books. You don't have to have, all the machinery. It is cheaper to teach a kid than ever, which is why micro schools are exploding. And yet my local school says I must have more money always. So yes, give me Andy's income tax, and I guarantee I'll get your property taxes back where they were before the income tax started, but within the next 10 years.
yeah, see, there are a couple of things that you just baked into your
Yeah.
argument
Once
that
again, simplifying and baking, my two
yeah,
my two
yeah,
techniques.
no, I get it. I get it. So start with the fact that two-thirds, 70% of the cost of schools are personnel costs.
That's right.
So whether it's teachers or
Mhm.
administrators or paraprofessionals or custodial
Mhm.
staff, all of that adds up to two-thirds. You have you have as part of that benefit costs like health, and you have
Mhm.
wages. We live in one of the highest cost of living
Right.
and highest wage areas of the country. And so
Mhm.
I hear a lot of people spouting New Hampshire's top 10 in expense or top 8 or whatever
Mhm.
number. We're in the middle of the New England states.
Mhm.
And comparing us to the other New England states is a fair
Right.
comparison because they're in the same labor market, same
Sure.
energy costs, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera. So we're middle of the pack. If you wanted to devise a system that limited spending to what schools have to deal with.
Hmm.
So they're insured by a risk pool in New Hampshire called
Hmm.
school care. School
Right.
care, I think, just went up 17%.
They had a
So
bad year.
they had a terrible year, and
No
and they're
kidding.
and they're not greatly
Mhm.
managed. And
Right.
that's a whole other podcast that
Right.
we could
Which
do.
I look forward to doing, by the way, but go ahead.
Yeah. So you give me escalators that include
Mhm.
things like that,
Mhm.
so that we're not doing arbitrary spending, we're not doing
Sure.
whimsical spending, but we're doing real calculation based on
Hmm.
what costs schools don't control, like healthcare, like
Right.
electricity. I'll give you another example. Schools pay for buses.
Hmm.
Oil and gas are going to go through the roof.
Hmm.
They will bust through inflation. You give me an escalator that includes something like that,
Hmm.
I'll take the bet. I'll take the income tax and the bottle of bourbon.
Sure. But you, Irish whiskey, thank you. But you see,
Okay.
but let's be clear here. I'm not comparing New Hampshire to other regions of the country. I'm not comparing it to even other states. I'm talking about the rate of inflation. Gas prices exploded and fell and exploded and fell since the year 2000. We remember, gas is still not as expensive as it was under Joe Biden in 2023 yet. I'm sure we'll hit it, but we haven't hit it yet. Health insurance costs up and down, up and down. I'm saying when you're doubling the rate of inflation, even as the number of customers in your business goes down, why in the world would I trust you with another source of revenue when there's clearly no interest in dealing with spending? Now, I hate this, but we're going to go long here, and I've got
Yeah.
to get to one more thing that
Yeah,
I think is
sure.
really important, which is the Claremont decision itself.
Hmm.
I printed out because every time I read it, I talk to people in other states and like, that's garbage. You're making this up. You did not rebuild an entire education funding system on the sentence, knowledge and learning being essential to the preservation of a free government. It is the duty of legislators and magistrates to cherish the interests of literature and the sciences and all seminaries and public schools. You use this sentence, cherish, to give the government, the courts, the power to strip the democratic system from our education funding. Admit it. That decision was crap. I mean, separate from the outcome. Once again, I'm complete. I I'm completely with you on. I mean, I get the income part. And no joke. It's to me that's a great conversation, and there's all kinds of things about social justice and reasonableness, whatever. I'm not crazy anti-income tax guy. I'm not from New Hampshire. I've lived with income tax my whole life. But it's like Roe v. Wade. Whatever you think about abortion, set aside abortion. That decision was crap from a legal standpoint. That was garbage, which is why you had Dobbs
Which
that
one, Roe
said
or
Roe v. Wade was just it's obviously it was. I mean, once again, not about abortion. If you'd made that ruling about baseball, that was just crap. The Claremont decision, from a legal standpoint, oh, I'm sorry, you don't get to vote on your schools anymore, on your budgets. The democratic process can't work anymore. That we found the word cherish. Wasn't it a song by the Association or something? It was crap, Andy. Admit it.
I was trying to remember whether it was the association or Temptations, but
I
you're
don't think it was
probably
Temptations, but you're probably right. I don't know.
I'll give
I'm
you
not
the
good on that.
associations, but you remember John Adams. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Adams wrote the education clause
Right.
based on the meaning of language of his time.
Mm-hmm.
So before you describe it as crap, you need to start looking at dictionaries and encyclopedia
Mm-hmm.
from
Well,
1784, which is what Antonin Scalia would do, the
sure.
originalists, and figure out what the meaning was back then.
And
And
by the way, a great discourse on this in the wonderful book, The Last Bake Sale, The Fight for School Funding. But even using the expansive view of the world, the word, if the consequence were whatever, here's the balance of the state and the courts, and we're going to tilt it like this, maybe Cherish will get you there. But to say, oh, I'm so sorry, yeah, you don't get to vote on the school spending anymore. We're just going to gut democracy because of the word cherish. It is an outrage to those of us who believe in self-government. You are one of those people, Andy Volinsky. Once again, I'm not arguing that you didn't get a good outcome for in a pragmatic sense of what people want. I'm not arguing the education thing. I'm just saying this is not the right way to run a democracy.
I would take issue with your description of what the Supreme Court did, because when
Mm-hmm.
you consider what the Supreme Court actually did, is it
Right.
said it's not right for some communities to pay five
Mm-hmm.
times the taxes as other communities for something that should be a state responsibility. So
Mm-hmm.
even it out. That's what the state Supreme Court said in
Mm-hmm.
1993, and they told us if you disagree that that's not happening, go prove it. And we
Right.
did a 6 week trial, went
Mm-hmm.
back to the court in 97 in Claremont
Right.
2. And in Claremont 2 through 9,
Mm-hmm.
we clarified. In the Londonderry decisions, another 10 years later, with a different group of lawyers and communities, again, the court with
Right.
different justices. In the Conval decision, 20 years after that, again,
Right.
different justices. So
Yep.
you're swimming upstream, Michael,
Well,
respectfully. I even the decisions I disagree with, I
mm.
generally don't describe them as crap. Maybe
Well,
that's
but
my
that just
legal
because this is
training.
ridiculous. Look, I'm with you that there's a lot of decisions to disagree with, but this is such an assault on the fundamental premise that the people should, and this is why local property taxes work the way they do. You can say, I don't like what we are doing with our money in my community. There's not some rich guy up in the lakes who's getting the check from my schools. It's me, it's our community. This is what we want to do. And I got to say, I get really frustrated when people try to put you, Andy, in an ideological box of about kind of Bernie Sanders style progressivism. Your book lays out your thinking. You've thought through this. It's well thought out. Two people can think
We
really hard and
disagree,
come to two
but
different
yeah.
conclusions. Exactly. And it bugs me that your proposal isn't going to get a serious hearing about the mechanics of funding schools because it's going to get caught in the income tax debate. But so let's wrap up with the politics. And we've got our rank punditry section coming. There's not a lot. I I can't find a lot of people willing to pick up your fight and join you. Am I missing them? Are they out there?
You are missing them.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think the leadership of both parties is failing us in
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of ways, but in this way in particular, not willing to have the discussion. So if you ask Alexis Simpson, the highest Democrat in the
Right.
House, her answer isn't this discussion. Her answer is
Right.
no.
Exactly. No,
If you,
won't talk it. Won't say it.
yep, if you ask Jason, actually, the second highest person in the House, Laura Talersky,
Mm,
quoted Jason Osborne
exactly.
when she said no. So they're off the table as far as
Mhm.
being open to a discussion of what
Right.
fair taxation and equitable funding
Right.
should be. But there are, and we're getting the responses through the website. My Substack, I don't know how many people watch your podcast, um, but my Substack on these topics is doing really, really well. And I'm getting lots of good
Mhm.
feedback. Some people don't understand pieces, and I'm happy to explain it. That's why I like being on these shows.
Mhm.
But I'll tell you another way that our leadership's failing us. So I put forward an income tax. You
Right.
may not agree, but it's a policy proposal, right?
Exactly.
The Libertarian Party responded with a death threat
Right.
against me. My party and the Republican Party have been silent
Mhm.
in this time of political violence, when Charlie Kirk and Melissa Hortman and
Sure.
others have been assassinated for their political beliefs, and it is inexcusable to call these people leaders and
Mhm.
have people like Kelly Ayotte and Ray Buckley not responding to threats of political
Right.
violence. So
Uh,
you're
I just
right,
want to say something
they're
about
not
New Hampshire.
taking this up.
At New Hampshire Journal, we've ignored it because we ignore everything the New Hampshire Libertarian Party does. And I'm not being snarky. No, it's just they have problems. Like I've lived in states that have an actual Libertarian Party, and sort of I don't know what's going on over there. But you might bring up the last thing I want to bring up, and I'm not just saying this because I have a bunch of great Andy Volinsky pun headlines already written. Why don't you run for governor separate from being governor, which I think you, of course, could be, particularly based on what Trump does, but because you're the only person who can articulate the vision about this tax shift, who's out there? You just admitted it. You're the leaders of your party aren't going to talk about it. Cindy Warmington isn't going to talk about it. If you ran for governor, it would be part of the conversation and more people would hear it. Why not run for the ideas as opposed to, the political partisan nonsense, et cetera?
Yeah, I think I've done it. I think to run for governor is a major undertaking that requires a level of commitment and walking away from other parts of your life.
Right.
And at this point in my life, it's not the right time to do that.
Well, I just want to say that no one is going to make the case. You know what I mean? It's like the case is going to be made. And so that's what frustrates me is, and I'm not trying to be mean to Executive Councilor Warmington. I'm sure she's a wonderful person who loves dogs and babies, whatever, but she's a terrible candidate. She can't do this, not because Ray Buckley won't let her, which he won't, but because she can't. I mean, like, she doesn't have enough information to have this conversation. And so, come on. How can we have policy development if we can't talk about the policies? My same thing for Senator Shaheen. Let's talk about, you're one of the top people on foreign policy. Let's talk about your foreign policy positions. I don't who's going to win the next race. That obviously that's fun too. But you can do both. You can have a real policy conversation and then you can have a real political snark conversation, which is what we're going to do next. But we're going to let you go. Andy Volinsky, thank you so much. The name of the book, one more time. The Last Bake Sale. And the website that people will never remember to find out about your tax policy.
NHTaxSavingsCalculator.com.
If it were in Klingon, it would be easier to remember, but we'll take what we can get. Thank you so much for joining us on the New Hampshire
Appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.